Zarathix remembered the day she first met David Chen in the Grand Archive of Velkarath. He had been hunched over a data slate, muttering about ancient propulsion theories while his coffee grew cold. His hair stuck up at odd angles, his spectacles were smudged, and he wore the same wrinkled shirt he'd worn for 3 days straight. She had found it endearing, this human scholar so absorbed in dead languages and forgotten technologies that he forgot to eat. That was 7 cycles ago. Now she stood on the observation deck of the Remembrance, watching her husband command a fleet of 30 Titan-class warships with the casual precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. "All vessels, Theta formation." David's voice echoed across the command channel, calm as still water. "The Krelvak won't expect us to split the asteroid field. Captains Vosh and Terena, take your battle groups through vectors 7 and 11. We'll catch them in a crossfire." Zarathix's chromatophores flickered with barely suppressed amazement. Her species, the Velshara, had been spacefaring for 12,000 years. They had seen empires rise and crumble, yet in all that time they had never witnessed anything quite like humanity's ascent. "Incoming transmission from the Krelvak Warmaster," the communications officer announced. "Put him through," David said, finally glancing up from his holographic display. His eyes, those soft brown eyes that had once gazed at her over poetry and wine, now held the weight of 3 million lives under his protection. The Krelvak Warmaster's face materialized, all ridges and battle scars. "Human commander, you are outnumbered 3 to 1. Surrender the colony worlds and we will grant you swift deaths." David adjusted his spectacles, that same absent gesture he'd made 1,000 times while researching in their apartment. "Warmaster Krelvoth, did you know that humans studied warfare for 10,000 years before we reached the stars? Not because we loved it, but because we feared it. We wrote treatises on strategy while your species was still perfecting the club." "Words from a scholar," Krelvoth sneered. "You should have stayed in your libraries, human." "I did stay in my libraries," David replied softly. "I read Sun Tzu and Clausewitz. I studied Alexander and Napoleon, Genghis Khan and Khalid ibn al-Walid. I learned from 500 generations of human conflict. And do you know what all those brilliant, terrible minds taught me?" Krelvoth said nothing. "War is not about strength," David continued. "It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves." He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. "Execute maneuver Canny 7. Zarathix watched as the human fleet scattered like startled fish, appearing to break formation in panic. The Krelvak armada, sensing victory, surged forward into the asteroid field. It was exactly what David had predicted. "Now," he whispered. The Titans emerged from the asteroid shadows where they'd been hiding, their stealth fields dropping simultaneously. The 2 battle groups completed their flanking maneuvers. The Krelvak found themselves surrounded in a 3-dimensional killbox, their superior numbers meaningless in the confined space. It was over in 14 minutes. Zarathix approached her husband as the last Krelvak ship signaled surrender. Up close, she could see the tremor in his hands, the tightness around his eyes. This was still David. Still the man who cried at sad songs and couldn't kill the insects that invaded their quarters. "You're thinking about the casualties," she said softly, her translator rendering the clicking consonants of her language into something he could understand. 372 Krelvak dead," David replied, pulling off his spectacles to clean them, a nervous habit. "Because I put them exactly where I wanted them. Because I read their cultural psychology texts and knew they'd see retreat as weakness. Because you saved 3 million colonists," Zarathix interrupted gently. "Because the Krelvak would have killed every human, Velshara and Torth in those settlements." David nodded, but she knew that wouldn't stop the nightmares. Later, in their quarters, he sat at his desk surrounded by holographic displays of ancient texts. He was already writing his after-action report, but she noticed he'd pulled up something else, a treatise on post-war reconciliation strategies. "You're planning the peace already," she observed. "The battle just ended." "The battle ended," David agreed, "but the war continues until both sides decide it's over. I'm drafting a proposal for cultural exchange programs with the Krelvak. Their warrior culture values strength, but they also value honor. If we can frame cooperation as the stronger path." Zarathix wrapped her primary arms around his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. This was the duality of humans that still amazed her. They could be ruthlessly efficient in violence, yet immediately turn their minds to healing the wounds they'd inflicted. The council was skeptical when you volunteered for fleet command, she said. They thought humans were too young, too inexperienced. They didn't understand what you were. What am I? David asked, turning to look at her. A species that never stopped learning, she replied. While we mastered the stars, you mastered yourselves. Every mistake, every war, every tragedy. You documented it, studied it, learned from it. When you reached space, you didn't just bring your technology. You brought 10,000 years of hard-won wisdom. David smiled. That same gentle smile from the archive. I'm still just a scholar, Zara. I just read a lot. No, she said firmly. You're a human. And that means you're a scholar who became a warrior when necessary. Who will become a peacemaker when the time comes. And who will probably write 3 papers about the psychological trauma of command before the month is out. He laughed, and the sound eased something in her bioluminescent core. Outside the viewport, 30 Titans held formation, their hulls bearing the scars of battle. Inside their command ship, a human scholar turned off his tactical displays and pulled up a file labeled Krelvak Cultural Integration, a framework for lasting peace. Zarathix had married a man who lived in libraries and dreamed of ancient civilizations. She'd watched him become a commander who could orchestrate death with terrible precision, but she'd also seen the tears he shed for every name on the casualty lists, human and alien alike. This, she realized, was humanity's true strength, not their capacity for violence, but their refusal to let violence define them. They were scholars who could become warriors. Warriors who remained scholars, always learning, always growing, always reaching for something better than what they were. Come to bed, she said finally. The peace proposals can wait until morning. David nodded, saving his work. As he stood, she noticed him glance one last time at the casualty reports, his lips moving in what she recognized as a human prayer for the dead. Tomorrow he would begin building bridges. Tonight he would mourn. And Zarathix understood finally why humanity would never be just another spacefaring species. They carried their entire history with them, every lesson learned in blood and tears, and they refused to forget. That made them dangerous. That made them formidable. That made them perhaps the galaxy's best hope for lasting peace.